Hey, what's up, y'all? So, this is your girl Diamond, and I have been wanting to have this conversation with this amazing woman that I met earlier this year. Shadawn McCants is a mental health expert. She's an HIV advocate. She is a speaker. She is a healer. And we both are CDC ambassadors. And that's where we met. So I wanted to definitely showcase her because she just had an amazing story, an amazing spirit. And so I wanted to bring her on the show and introduce her to y'all. So thank you for coming to the show, Shadon.
Well, of course, Diamond. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Like you said, we've been trying to get this on the books. And so we said, hey, this is the date. This is when we're doing it. And it just happens to be Veterans Day. So I also want to say, thank you to all of my veterans, those who have served. I really, really appreciate it, especially with all that we have going on in the world. So yeah, just taking this moment on no, this probably won't air, of course, that day, but just saying thank you to our veterans and everybody and everything that they've done. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be.
Absolutely. We do definitely appreciate you, veterans. So, tell me about growing up. Like, tell me about your tribe. Tell me about who was loving on you. Tell me about, like where did you grow up, and tell me about your family.
So that is a very, very deep question. Because of course, when I think about my childhood, of course, I think of my mom, my dad, my siblings, and where I was born. I tell people I was born, I came into the world like a storm. I was born in the 78 winter blizzard, in 1978 in Cincinnati, Ohio. At the time, my parents were together. Um, but they didn't stay together long. Needless to say, my mother went on to do what she did with my stepfather. My dad went on to marry his wife, and I was raised with my mother, my stepfather, and three siblings. So I have an older sister. Who's 4 years older than me, a younger brother who is no longer with us, and my baby sister who is 10 years younger than me. And so we were raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. I tell people growing up, I was the kid that most of us can relate to, or some of us can relate to, who are in this or who become therapists and speakers. I was the one with the report card that said talks too much. Excellent student, amazing student, talks too much. If only she could leave her classmates alone, we would have, like, I was that girl. I was
Period.
straight A, right. I was a straight A student. My mother did not play when it came to academics, so I didn't have any other choice. And I was also raised in a household where I tell people my mother did the best that she could. My mother and my father, even though they weren't together, the first 12 years of my life were very difficult, were very challenging. Um, Unfortunately, like a lot of Black families, abuse becomes normal and normalized. And in my situation, there was a lot of physical and emotional and mental abuse that happened. But what I know today, of course, is my mom did the best that she could. When we think about generational trauma, generational wounding, and pain, it was just something that was passed down. And so I learned very early on how to be a survivor, how to be resilient, right? In the face of everything that came up against me. My biological father wasn't in my life the first pretty much 12 years of my life. They were together when I was born, and then by the time 18 months, they were separated. Um, I tell people when I met my dad at the age of 12, my entire life, I though fantasized about this man, wanting him to come and save me from all that I was dealing with. And when I met him, my dad was also in a very painful place in his life, and getting ready to go to prison and just not knowing how to be a father to the daughter that he said he loved but didn't know how. Which then sent me on a different trajectory. So not only did I face the abuse of my mother, in what felt like not being loved, not feeling enough, in a home that you would think was full of love. Um, but the way that we were loved was just, yeah, it was unhealthy.
Hmm.
And so then there was my father who, when I finally got to meet him and thought that things were going to change, he didn't know how to love me either. And so I tell people, what I realize now is I really, really went on a journey of being the young girl, looking for love in all the wrong places. Um,
Mm.
in the midst of still, like, if you saw the outside, you was like, the girl is amazing, she's brilliant, she's smart, I was a model, I was doing all these things, but inside I was really, really wounded. I was really,
Mm,
really hurt. But I was still showing up.
yeah.
I tell people I learned how to be a therapist, a healer very young, because everybody leaned on me. Um, and so I was what everybody needed. But when I needed someone, it wasn't many people there.
Mm.
Um,
What was the cultural dynamic in Cincinnati at the time, in this kind of like 80s, late 70s, 80s? What was that like growing up? Like, what was it? Because we've come from similar cities. I'm
uh-huh,
from Indianapolis, and there was a lot of stuff going on that I don't relate to when I hear about growing up in the South.
uh-huh.
And yes, I had Southern people as my kind of like ancestors, but it was just a little bit different growing up in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And there's some cultural things that I didn't recognize when I think about people who like grew up like in New York or California. We were in our little bubble in the Midwest. And so can you kind of describe that?
So I thank you for saying that because that's exactly what it was. I feel like the Midwest, it was a bubble. For me, I'm gonna be honest. As I've grown, as I've matured, and I'm in the space that I'm in now, what I didn't realize, I didn't know race. I don't think that I knew race. I don't know that I didn't realize that race really existed the way that it did. For me, we were raised in a bubble. I was raised in what we coined the ghetto, you know, or now what we call our marginalized spaces and communities, those most disproportionately impacted. I was raped, but so I knew the blackness of my community. I didn't really know that honestly, even then, racism was as real as it is. Like at that time, of course, we didn't know what gaslighting was. We didn't know what microaggressions were. We didn't know any of that. And so I feel like yes, it was a bubble. It was Cincinnati. It was, and of course the weather is very gloomy most of the time. So raised on, so what if anybody knows about Cincinnati, it's a Cincinnati, Kentucky, Indianapolis. It's just like we are
Yeah.
the center of what feels like the Midwest. And so it's a very slow place, I feel like. Not fast paced at all. It's being down here now in the South, it's definitely I would give that the country versus, being here in Texas, which they would say is
Yeah.
country. I'm like,
If we're
no,
in, especially since we live in Houston, because we both currently live in Houston,
yeah,
because we live in a city, the fourth largest city in America, it does
yes,
feel definitely different from back
it
home.
does. And so when I think of the culture, yeah, it was just my little world. I didn't know the world outside of me. I didn't like now the way that I know New York and California and of course Texas and all the other big places that I've been. I'm like, oh, I was sheltered. I really feel like I was sheltered. We were sheltered in the Midwest.
I
I
think
recently,
about it kind of I call it like your racial IQ because I know when I was growing up, it was literally black and white. Like and it was a bubble because I did live in the hood. So in my social structure, while I knew white people existed, there was a power in black people because I was in the black community. And also even in school and when we were growing up, this is during the time when they had already kind of done the desegregation stuff, and so there was a set percentage of white people that needed to be at the public schools and black people that needed to be at the public schools. So at our public schools it was black and white, and then we had probably a sprinkle of Mexican, which included anybody who spoke Spanish. It wasn't no those Dominican. It was none of that. It was they Mexican. And same thing with Asian. It was they Chinese, and they could have been Thailand. They could have been Thai. They could have been so many different things. But we had literally at our school, we had two Asian people, Lakeview and his sister Tran, and that is all only racial IQ that I had in regard to. I knew they existed, but actually having access to their culture and them being in a position to where there was these kind of nuances. I didn't have that. I didn't have that growing up at all.
I'm gonna tell you when I got it. I got it in the ninth grade.
Period.
So when I think about elementary school, like you said, it was a sprinkle here or a sprinkle there because my neighborhood, it was like seriously, English Woods, Fay Apartments, Millville, like all of us went. So all of our schools were composed of all of us. So yeah, there were a few sprinkles of white kids. I don't even remember if it was like I don't remember if it would have been Asian. I just don't. I remember black and white, and not many of them, but many of us. It wasn't until the ninth grade my mother decided that I was very brilliant and she needed to send me to an all girls parochial school. I'm like,
Woo.
I was like, huh? So she sent me to McCallie in Cincinnati, Ohio. I got there, and that was when, and I didn't even realize it until recently, but again, it was a culture shock for me. I walk into school and I realize I am now truly the minority. I could count in a school of probably like 800 students, it was maybe 50 of us. And I said, OMG. And now, and when I remembered it years ago, it was like I was at a petting zoo and I was the pet.
Mm.
Because I remember being asked, oh my gosh, Shadawn, you're so dope. Oh my God, your hair. Oh my God, your nails. Oh my God, this. And it was like, Shadawn, you're so down. I want to be down with you. Like, I remember these things now. And I'm like, the hell? Shadawn, you're the coolest kid on the block. Like, oh my God. And I could remember now the assimilation of some of them wanting to be like me, the black girl. And I remember telling my mom it was so uncomfortable being there. And I remember counting the 50 students, the 50 of us. And so what I realized now was probably because some of us got scholarships, even though I remember my mom sacrificing $6,000, $7,000 for me to go to this school. I was like, so needless to say, fast forward, I told my mom, if you don't get me the hell out of here, I'm gone. I'm gonna drop out. This can't happen. And what I realized too, and this is where I know about the educational system fails us. It's because I got there and I was a straight A student in public school, and there I was a CD student, and it tore me apart. And of course, the more I think about it now, it's of course the systems that are set up against us, and our kids are not receiving the best. It's about class, it's about all the different things. And so I realized that my straight A's here were CDs, and I had to work a lot harder. And that wasn't my fault. You know, you can't make that up, but it
Right.
just showed me how their situations were a lot different than ours. So they were in parochial school, private schools from, kindergarten on up. And the academics that they received, the intelligence, the education was way different. And so I worked my butt off. And I think by the time I left there, I was about to be average. But it crushed me. And so I went back to public schools. I told my mom, baby, if you keep me here where I won't be graduating. And so I went back to public school. My favorite. It was one of the most popular high schools in Cincinnati, Withrow. And so I went, but I honestly, at that point, I just acted a fool. So I got there the second half of my 10th grade year, the first half of my 11th grade year, I acted an ass. Baby, but I enjoyed it and I loved it. But of course, when I look back, hindsight, is always 2020. I wish I could have done things differently. There is a part of me that does wish I would have stayed at the parochial school and things would have been a little different. Um, but I also say, and I know this too, nothing happens by mistake, and everything happens for a reason. And so I've learned to be okay with it is what it is. I'm now, of course, I didn't graduated from high school, college degree, master's degree, a license. So I did what I needed to do.
Gotcha.
Some definitely deviations there. But baby, that's when I really realized like, oh, they really do exist. White folks and how they exist and how they lived. But if I'm honest though, too, I didn't remember that experience until recently. And I honestly, it was when George Floyd passed away. And
Mm.
not, wait a minute, let me get that correctly. When George Floyd was murdered. It wasn't until then that I was able to really, really understand race in a different lens, to be able to see it from a different lens and my experiences and take the blinders off. I tell
Mm,
people it wasn't until then that I really realized how Black I really was.
period. The best way to support is to engage with the content. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Recently, we were at an event and it was an art event and it started off as an art event and then there was Vive there and we were having like a meeting with their organizers and it was basically community coming together and they asking us questions of how, they can be more effective in our community around HIV. And we all were sitting around. You walked in a little bit late, but because you do this, you ready at the drop of a dime. And so somebody, and I talked about this on the show, y'all, on our regular show, not the interview, but one of the patrons in the conversation kind of asked a very, very insensitive question to me. And the gist of it was, how could people be getting HIV after we have been kind of like pounded with the information? How can people still be susceptible to catching HIV? And um and it, to me, coming from another queer person, particularly a gay man, it
Mhm.
felt insensitive. It felt very like, what, like, just you asking this question let me know that you haven't done the work to dismantle some of your prejudices or stigma around this. So just asking that question felt a little weird, but soon as the question was asked, you chimed in and kind of shared your story about, you growing up and how, you became your status. And so can you share that experience and how you read that situation? Do you remember the situation?
I I think I do kind of remember the situation. So for the audience, for those, of course, we didn't introduce myself that way because I'm so much bigger than a lot of things that have happened
Period.
to me. But I happen to be a beautiful, bold Black woman who has been living with HIV for December will be 29 years. I've realized that it's been over half my life that I've been living with this virus. And so listening to him ask the question, it was very like, oh wow, did you really just say this out of your mouth? How could you guys still be contracting HIV? I mean, it was very um aggressive in some ways. And like I could understand his own feelings, but yeah, it wasn't okay because how are you? Well, one, we just cannot not have conversations anymore about racism and about oppressive systems. So for those that are probably trying to figure out, okay, 29 years, over half her life. I was 17 when I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed in 1995, literally 3 years after Magic Johnson had just came out and told his own story. And at that time, who did you see outside of Magic Johnson and outside of Ray Lewis Thornton? But a lot of people didn't even know her. I mean, unless you really paid attention to the Essence article that she was featured in 97. Nobody was really still talking about HIV. What we know is, if we're being honest, the start of the pandemic was white gay men.
Period.
Folks of color, Black folks in particular, did not think that HIV was something that impacted or could impact our community. And unfortunately, let's be real, we're still there today. As an advocate who does this work, pretty much this is what I do full time and professionally. I still sit in spaces where Black individuals, folks, male and female, of all genders and sexuality, are like, really? It's still a thing? I didn't think it was that serious. And so listening to him say that, I'm glad you said it right even now, wanting to say, but sir, what are you doing to do your part as an individual? I think he had said he had been living with HIV almost 40 years.
Since
And
the
so,
70s.
since the 70s, right? And so you're upset, but what are you doing to educate, inform, so that folks aren't still getting diagnosed? But we also know that there are many factors that play a part in folks still being diagnosed today.
Yeah.
Whether it's stigma, whether it's shame, whether it's systems. Because one of my favorite mentors and someone I love is Vanita Ray. She's an amazing advocate and activist in the space. And she was the one who even helped me to understand, because again, for a long time, I just blamed myself. You know, young girl looking for love in all the wrong places. And she asked me, she said, Shadawn, so let me just ask you this question. She says, so you were 17 having sex. There was another 17-year-old white girl still having sex as well. You guys were having the same kind of sex more than likely. She was like, so tell me the difference of the type of sex that you were having. And I listened and I was like, huh? And so it made sense. Like she helped me to understand. She said, you weren't doing anything different than the white girl across the yard. The difference was is that they saw your Black body as not important, as not of value, and didn't need the same services that she did. Because I'm pretty sure that when she went into the clinic and maybe gotten tested for all her STDs, somebody gave her all the resources to get the services that she needed, to put the supports around her to do whatever she needed to do so that she could, get the help, whether it was mental, emotional, physical, whatever that was. Whereas for me, I was seen as the strong Black woman, even at 16, 17. I was seen as a superwoman, a Black strong woman who didn't need anything, but yet I was living on my own, going to school full time, coming into a clinic with STDs every 3 months, 3 to 6 months, if not more often than that. So where were the services and the systems that were there that were supposed to be created to help me? Well, the reality is they weren't. And we talk about equality, we talk about equity, and there was at that time, I don't even think it was no equality, let alone equity in what I needed.
And then you also are bringing up the positive shit that somebody could think, oh, you're a strong Black girl, but you Black woman. The negative side of that is I don't even want to waste resources on this Black girl because she's gonna keep coming back because they are promiscuous, because inherent that they just be out here having sex anyway. These kind of negative stereotypes that comes with being a Black girl as well, that people don't even want to waste, quote unquote waste resources on giving it to you or give you the information because you're not going to listen anyway because you're just out here being a hoe.
Exactly. And I have to say, my provider at the time, and I still to this day, I love her. And I believe she genuinely loved me, but her lens was jaded again because she saw me as resilient. And I'm in the space where I'm just like, can we to a degree reevaluate, reassess that word? It's like we wear it as a badge of honor. And it's like, but do I choose to be resilient? Is that something that I want to do? That's again something that you all have given me. And I'm tired of having to be that. And so yeah, that was what happened. And so hearing him say that, it kind of stung because I'm like, well, I'm sorry because I didn't see anybody that looked like me. I didn't know a lot about HIV at the time. And the same things that I was facing then, folks are still facing now. Some of
And
those
you were facing when you were in the 70s catching.
contracting, exactly, contracted the same thing that was happening. Because, sir, you thought it could, I'm pretty sure you didn't think it could happen to you.
Period.
You thought it was just your white male counterparts over up in New York and California, but you didn't think it could hit you. So what was, and of course I wouldn't want to say to him, well, how? But the
Right.
reality is that are you in these spaces? Are you listening to folks when I'm a champion in many spaces, like you said, for the CDC, I'm a captain for V Risk to Reasons. I do work with Merck and Thera and like all these different folks because my passion is two things. I'm prevention and treatment. Sis, if you're living with HIV, I need you in care because the reality is that it doesn't have to be a death sentence. I'm not saying that it isn't, but it doesn't have to be, not in 2024. And then also, as we talk about prevention, sis, when I say that, very inclusive, we ain't got to come down this space. We ain't got to come down this road. So how do I help you to stay negative? How do I keep you from coming to the secret society of what this looks like? And so recognizing that so many women, when I hear, because I'm a part of research with UT Health as well, and trying to understand the thoughts and the perceptions of Black women around PrEP. It's the same story. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of it is representation. I don't see myself, but those that have seen PrEP or anything about HIV, they don't see themselves in the marketing and the information. What do they see? The community of LGBTQIA. They don't even see themselves. Even my trans sisters say a lot of times they just now started seeing themselves. And it's like, but why are we just now here? And so individuals are like, I just didn't think it impacted me that way. But then when we look at the data and I give them the numbers and I say, first off, when we talk about over 40% of new HIV diagnoses are Black folks, 52% of them are in the South. Of that, 60% are Black women. So make it make sense. It's just like, and they're like, huh? 1 in 48 Black women susceptible to contracting HIV in their lifetime. 1 in 9 not even knowing their status here in Houston.
Yeah.
This is real. And so then you ask this question again, sir, because folks ain't talking about it.
Right.
And what we know is we are in the Bible Belt. And so there's a couple things that we're not going to talk about. There's three letters, 3 words: SEX, HIV, and the IRS. We don't want to hear none of them.
Period.
So we're in a space, we're in a place that we really do have to think about how are we going to shift the conversation and the narrative so that we can have these conversations so that, sir, maybe we can answer your question. How are folks still? And like, if we have the conversation, then maybe we won't have so many diagnoses. But we need to get there.
I remember growing up, so I came out in 94. And for me, and we talked about this in the group because I brought this up too. I was like, for me, people were too busy trying to fix me than to teach me how to be saved. They were too busy trying to fix whatever they thought culturally was the problem with me. As a queer at the time, um, prior to my transition in 94, when I was a little, wasn't even fucking out the closet. I didn't have sex until after I transitioned. I transitioned when I was fucking 13, 14. I didn't have sex till I was fucking 16. Prior to transitioning, it felt like my uncles, my teachers, my fucking counselors, guidance counselors, everybody was trying to fix me to make me more masculine because they saw you're a little boy, so you need to act like a little boy. And so they were using HIV as a punishment and a threat to change my behavior. Even though I wasn't having sex at all, but it was, if you keep going down this route, you're going to end up with that gay man's disease. If you keep going down this route, you're going to end up with this quote unquote curse. And this is how they were talking about it in the late 80s, early 90s. This is how the conversation that they were having. And so, and even when you go into queer spaces, when you go into the club, it was condoms, 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 condoms. It was not talking about like what, it just wasn't having the real holistic conversation about what was happening. So by the time I get to 17, by the time I am having sex, I'm super, super fearful, not having any kind of conversations about queer love. So I'm not susceptible to a motherfucker who is finally making me feel loved and they're talking about let me take the condom off and I'm finally feeling we've been together for this long and da 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 da. You're not working on me to make me less susceptible to that shit. So here you go, putting me while you're trying to quote unquote warn me, fix me, you're not putting me in a position to be successful. I am still susceptible to other bullshit that can force me, not even not knowing, because at that point I knew all the quote unquote facts about HIV, but I wasn't in a position to have these healthy conversations about queer love, about queer sex, about queer bodies. So there were so many things that people were not talking to me about. So what you just said definitely resonate with me because they were not talking about it. And it made me way more susceptible than I should have been when I was a teenager.
And it was because I think even when I think back as I was listening to you, at least there was a conversation. But again, for me as a Black girl, there wasn't.
Period.
Because for us, HIV isn't a thing. Like it just wasn't. And even knowing all of the STIs that I had contracted, as a young adult. I vaguely remember my doctor maybe saying something about HIV, maybe once. What I also found out was is that because I had to advocate for myself to actually even get tested. A lot of people don't know this. So I contracted meningitis the year. That's how I ended up finding out. And I don't even know, let me even take that back because that's not it was a catalyst. Let me say that. So I had tell people like which it was, I had gotten sick like September of that year. And it was, I call it the forever cold. I couldn't shake this cold. So what we know now to be the symptoms of HIV, like the cold-like symptoms, the body chills, the aches, and all these different things. And so I ended up contracting meningitis, hospitals, 6 days, 8 spinal taps later, they sent me home. I had to advocate and say, hey, Linda, something's not right. Can you test me for HIV? She's
What
like,
made you think of that? What made you think of it?
so what made me think of it, and this is where I tell people the spiritual part of me. Earlier that year in April, I had written a journal entry and I had heard about HIV. Now I had heard about it and knew that it was going around or whatever and that it was a thing. And when I thought about the life that I was living, it was a possibility. But again, nobody was talking to me about it. I just happened to be a very brilliant young adult. And I wrote in this journal entry in April, and I have it. I should have brought it out here. And it said, I wrote all the partners I had had up until that moment. And I had written a letter. I said, I addressed it to God in the journal. And I said, God, if only you would keep me from contracting. And I said, AIDS. I had put that in April because something was in my spirit that said, baby, something ain't right. Something ain't right. So that's what it was. That's the only way I can tell people. I knew something wasn't right. And so when I got sick and I went in the hospital and they tried to tell me I was fine, I said, no, I'm not. I knew I wasn't okay. And so I went, and this was when, you had to do blood work and it take 2 weeks. And it definitely came back. What I found out though was this, is that earlier in January of that year, my medical record, the lead doctor of the clinic, the youth clinic, the adolescent clinic I was going to, he wrote in my note, she's high risk for syphilis and HIV, needs to be tested. It didn't happen.
Wow.
Had a conversation and not the test for neither one. And so to again goes back to my previous point when I talk about Black girls, when I talk about Black women, when I talk about just the Black diaspora of us, they don't take us serious. Because what reason, and Linda's a white woman, I love her, but Linda's a white woman. Linda, why didn't you? You saw me coming in your office, I could tell you whether it was gonorrhea, chlamydia, trichomonas, I could tell you whatever it was. Yeast infection, vaginal vaginosis, I could tell you what it was. But not at one point did you say, hey, Shadawn, we need to have a real serious conversation. She didn't. And so, not even her. And of course, my mom wasn't having those conversations for me. My mother didn't even have a birds and the bees conversation. Hell, I didn't know about my cycle, none of that from her. And so, for you were browbeat with HIV. For me, it was complete silence.
Complete silence.
It was
Yeah.
complete silence. And in a lot of ways, it's still that. Because when I talk about working with Black women, when I'm having these focus groups and conversations and just the kickbacks and workshops that I do, so many times it just breaks my heart that I hear so many women say, but I didn't think it could be me, or that ain't got nothing to do with me, or I only got one partner, so I'm good. But yet I have students who work, or, individuals who are working in different various clinics across the city. And just recently, 3 Black women in less than 3 weeks were tested positive, all between the ages of 30 and 50. And all in monogamous, or what they thought were monogamous relationships,
Mm.
test positive. And again, them say to, the individuals, me, never would have thought. Um, so there's more work for us to do. There's a lot of work to do.
The best way to support is to engage with the content. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. There's also something that I noticed. So, all right, so we go through this pandemic. This the first I always took up when people when it comes to talk. I always point out when it comes to people in our age bracket, we don't been through multiple pandemics, and so
Yeah.
when we go through the epidemic of AIDS. There's like this unknown, and then there's like this kind of like where it's super hype, like say like late 80s, early 90s, and then the drug thing shifts, and so more people are surviving. So it kind of between 95, 96, and um when another drug shift happened, it becomes a booming business. HIV become this booming business. And so, unlike the mainstream, because of the dynamics of who is affected by it, there's almost like this inversion of power. And you kind of pointed to it in regards to when the silence happened. So, because it was affecting white gay men, when the money started to be thrown at HIV, white gay men were in power of services, programs, money, how it was you get what I'm saying? That's just what it was. And then it kind of the hierarchy went from white gay men. I felt like it was black gay men. And then it was trans women. And I don't even know when I think recently we just started to get into some kind of position of power, but it definitely wasn't um cis women. Like
Mm,
it just wasn't that. And so when you hear about cis women, it was connected to DL men, which
mm.
still is centering black gay men. And so there's a power structure in this that is kind of inverted. So sometimes because of that inversion, it worsens the silence because you have these white gay men who are in these power structure literally doing that kind of racist, that kind of misogynistic silencing and quieting, and it makes them feel like and it makes even somebody on the outside looking in look like, well, they are the main ones who are affected, so why wouldn't they have power in this situation? But they're not taking in consideration the intersection of how this can make it worse for somebody who is a black woman because of race and blah 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 blah. And so, can you speak to that kind of inverted power structure and how you have seen that and navigated that and seen it kind of play out in certain situations?
Where when you say we've gone from white gay men as the leading power
Uh-huh.
players
And
to
then to this last 15, I would say like 15 years, it has shifted to where I'm starting to see not totally super shift, but I'm starting to see more um of that kind of lower rung. I'm seeing more cis women out here talking about it. I'm seeing more trans women talking about it, and black gay men talking about it. I'm seeing a more, just a little bit more.
and the question is, I have to ask, is it because we're in the spaces or is it because it's really happening?
Mm,
That's just the truth.
mm,
Because like you gave the good rundown, is that for a long time, the leadership, the focus was white gay men, and what that looked like. And so we needed to end it for them. Then it was like, oh no, Black folks are actually being impacted by HIV, which the truth is, those most impacted are those most marginalized, which are Black folks and now Latino. Black and Latino are the number one.
period.
Number one, when we think of race or ethnicity. That's where it's at. So it went from gay men, all the money going there, to you're right. It went to Black gay men. Then it was like, because I know a lot of them that are in leadership roles, and I have conversations with them now frequently because it's like, now you not only are on the menu, but you're at the table. So what are you gonna do?
Right.
Then now the money did over the last like three years solidly and definitely. Now there was a large focus on our trans community. Then we went back because I'm sitting here at tables. Now we're back at Black men who sleep with other men, and a sprinkle, because I feel like it's a sprinkle. But it's only, I think what has happened is the money, it's always been the focus of where the money flows.
Right.
And now the money is in Black men, Latino, and Black women, cis and trans women. And that's only because that's where the money is at right now. Because the money is there. When the money dries up, it's gonna go back to what it's always been. And that's just my belief. I mean, am I happy? Am I hopeful that, we can do enough work in this time frame that the lens is on us right now, as Black women, cis and trans? We got a lot of work to do in a very short window because the reality is I know that the money will shift again. Um, like now when we talk about ending the epidemic, for those that may have heard it or don't know, there's this push that we will see an end to the epidemic by 2030. This particular president created an EHE plan, and the EHE plan with the hope that we will come to an end. But what does an end to the epidemic really look like? It's an end for white folks. It ain't an end for Black folks, and I'm just gonna be honest.
Period.
And that is disgusting to me. I'm going to tell the truth. The end is going to look like when 90, it's what I think it's called 90, 90, 90, 95, 95, 95 is what some people are saying now, where 95% of individuals know their status, 95% of people are in treatment, and 95% are virally suppressed. What does that mean? Undetectable equals you untransmittable, or as we know it, just to say for some, because some will not get to undetectability, but they will get to viral suppression, which is under 200. And so the real reality is, but for who? And the majority of whom? So they'll get there because what we know is like even when we talk about prevention and we talk about PrEP, the numbers are up. Over 80% of folks are using PrEP, but of that 80%, how many of them are African American? And how many of them are African American women? Make it make sense. And so, yeah, we're in this space where we see it's no longer the focus on white gay men as the primary, like, oh, wow. But I still don't think we're doing enough when it comes to those that are most impacted, which are Black and Latino folks, Black and brown folks. We're just not doing enough. And I mean, again, though I don't, what they say, bite the hand that feeds you, right? So I'm very clear that the money is coming down now. There was the most recent monies that went to, I think it was at least four major health departments, Houston being one of them, that received funding to really put a focus on prevention, specifically PrEP and Black women. And several other cities and states are doing it. Atlanta, I think, is another one. But I also am, like I said, I need to understand your motive. What's your motive? And I've also talked about the folks that are getting the money. How are you really centering Black women? What does that look like? What's your inclusivity look like? And again, is this something when the money dries up, are you willing to still do and be in this fight? Because it's still impacting us and it's not okay.
Right. Let me say this. I want to put this in here. So it was in 2022 in the United States, the data shows that the rate of HIV had declined in 20%. That's the positive. Which highlights the effectiveness of early diagnosis and linking people to actual being diagnosed and the quality of care in their treatment. In order for us to actually end it in the way that for us, we actually have to address inequities and barriers of care. That's just what we have been talking about. Viral suppression, like 61% of Black people diagnosed with HIV were viral suppressed at the end of 2022. That's what the numbers from the CDC. 78% of Black people with diagnosed HIV infections were linked to care within a month. That is a positive thing, like, somebody actually being linked to care. But the positive is the rate is going down. So negative is going to be Black women make up 50% of the HIV diagnosis, and among them, trans women, they account for 41%. So you clearly see that while the positive general is going down, we are still dominating the numbers as Black
Exactly.
women.
And I'm gonna be honest, a lot of us have talked about that data because it was in
Hmm.
2022.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I will take the positive, but I really question the data. I really do. Because we were also in the middle of a pandemic. So are the numbers accurate because they're accurate, or are they accurate because we were in the midst of a pandemic and people were not getting tested the way that they needed to?
Mm. Amen. That's
And
a
people were not actively trying to engage in research or any other part when we were in the midst of a whole nother pandemic called COVID.
yeah.
So thankfully, yes, I believe that we are um on a positive wave. I would like to believe that we are. When I was at the CDC recently this year for a convening, when we did go, and for a long time, we've talked about the numbers of the individuals living with HIV in the US is 1.2. We've said that for years, but they actually acknowledge that the number is a little higher. The overall number of incidents of individuals living with HIV is more than 1.2. It's a little more than that. It's not at 1.3, but it was way more than 1.2. There is still work for us to do, and you just said it, because yeah, even though the overarching numbers look really good, but for who? Not for black and brown bodies. It just isn't. And the reality is I'm there's a part of me that is a little concerned again that when you achieve those for them, what does that mean for us
Yeah.
that are most impacted? So yeah, the overall number, we can say the numbers are down and this, that, but for who? But for who when the numbers are still high for Black folks? Like, make it make sense. So,
So
um,
recently in because I just want to be vulnerable in this moment to kind of just share my experience in I I took it took me 10 years to get tested. And this is somebody who grew up in this, browbeat with it. It took me 10 years after I got out because I got out of sex work in 2009. Um and while as a sex worker, it was super easy because you're dealing with all these men. It was super easy. Oh, condom, and it no, and actually, clients weren't not all the time, but clients weren't. Most of them weren't trying to, raw dog or da 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 da. But some will try to pay you too. But it kind of was kind of a part of the job to use protection, and even protection wasn't, it ain't fucking 100%. But uh, that was pretty common. But in my personal life, I was doing risky ass shit for love. In my personal life, I was, I'm in a relationship with somebody, and because we've been in a relationship for so long, we're not getting tested, and we're just doing. So I got I, I got out of a relationship in 2012. And so and I really wasn't active and da 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 da, but I wasn't getting tested. And I asked myself, like, why, what was it that was like stopping you from getting tested? What was it? And I really, because I knew this is how you get on the medication and da 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 da. What was it? And so in my experience, it was like it was fear, it was the potential of having all what motherfuckers said, like, you go down this path, you gonna get it, making that kind of curse, that kind of whatever the fuck they're saying that they were putting on me with their tongues, making that true, making that prophecy that they were trying to give me true, whatever. It just was it was so scary. I didn't want that experience. I didn't know if because I was going through whatever I was going through as a trans woman, would I have the mental fortitude to deal with that if I did get that information? Would I have the um I was super just scared of that. So finally got a job and got health insurance, and I went and got tested. And although I came up negative, it made me super shamed. Even that made me super like, bitch, what the fuck, you could have not took you could have been in so many weird situations if just because you didn't know. You could have been taking even more risk for yourself. And it made me feel bad just doing that. And so I'm saying this because, yo, like, this is you. This is your, even when I was doing, even the doctor, when she was doing it, so she tested me, and then I was waiting for, like, the nervousness about waiting for the results. And so I do an appointment like a month later, and I come into the office with her, and she's sitting there talking to me about like bullshit. And I'm just sitting there, palm sweating, like, God, what the fuck is happening? And she's talking to me about bullshit. And I was like, ma'am, just pull the band-aid off. Tell me what is going on. And she was like, oh, Diamond, we would have called you like a week later. If you had tested positive, we would have called you like a week later. And I was like, oh, well, you didn't call me and tell me nothing. So I'm sitting here scared, like you about to give me the hammer, and I didn't even know. And it just was the whole scenario that I put myself in was, it was just super super scary and super super I felt shame that I was like going through this after decades of being browbeat, and me even saying to people, you gotta get tested, you gotta know your status, me even doing that and saying it and knowing it. And I was just so scared of the prophecy coming true. And so that was my experience. It wasn't about miseducation. It was about the fear of the stigma and the me being able to deal with the diagnosis if it had. Like, I didn't know if I had the fortitude to do it in that time of my life. And
Mhm.
so I just wanted to share that. It was just something about it wasn't about the education for me. It was, I knew the education, I just was fearful.
But even if I ask you, what was the fear? What was the fear?
Just another fucking thing on my notch that can make a motherfucker not love me.
Mm.
Just
Mhm.
another motherfucking thing. Just all the, just another. God, I got all this. I'm already not I'm already in a situation where I'm struggling to find somebody that look past me being trans and not objectifying me. And
Mhm.
then bam, here goes another motherfucking thing
Mhm.
that can make a motherfucker be like, oh, damn. Yeah,
Mhm.
nah. So it was that. It was the mortality of it, even with knowing the drugs are different now. It just all of that. And I think it would maybe different if I grew up now, because it is a more positive depiction
Mhm.
about it. But when I was growing up, it was death sentence. So even though it's not a death sentence now, that is how I'm introduced to this. And
Mhm.
so yeah, it just was, yeah, that fear of it being another thing that I can't control anymore. At least I this ain't got nothing to do with that, but even me, like, I got gastric sleeve a year ago. And even that, I was like, I can't be fat and be trans and be black and be da 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 da. Like, I need to, anything. I'm a trans woman. Anything I can fucking control, I'm gonna do what I need to do to control it. And so even that, it was like, damn, if I'm ever going to be in, it's just what it is. That's just how I felt. I felt like these things is gonna be another fucking notch on the belt for me to be alone.
Right. And so hence not getting tested, which is what
Yeah.
also, and I'm gonna be honest, that's not just the trans woman experience.
Yeah.
It's an experience of so many women. And so many individuals, period. We talked about earlier, just me being a healer and just coining myself the healologist, because I really am a lover of souls and I really want folks to heal from the inside out. So many of us, especially like I said, on the Black diaspora, folks of color, our BIPOC community, our LGBT, so many of us have experienced and lived with so many wounds and so much pain. And often it then shifts us to a narrative of believing that we are not enough, um, unworthy, unlovable. And there out of that, we then show up in the world seeking that validation or that affirmation from folks, wanting to be loved, wanting to be accepted, to be seen, to be heard, to be experienced. And because of that, then we make decisions as a result of that. And I do know that, when I talk about folks, not wanting to get tested, I do know that a lot of it is that, like, is what you kind of like what I heard you say is that if I did find this out, like as a person who has been diagnosed, one of the things is who's going to love me? Am I going to be able to have a family? Am I going to be able to have children? Will I ever get married? Like all those different things were stories that I realized keep people still from getting tested, and knowing their status. And even those that know their status, keeping them from getting into care and staying into care is because of the rejection, of the abandonment, of the isolation, of all the things that are attached to it. And so, of course, for me, I'm going to encourage people to begin to heal, to do your work, because the goal of healing is so that you get to return to the wholeness of who we are, aside from all of the bullshit that the world has dealt us, the hands that we've been dealt, the things that often happen through us and for us, we can't see it that way. And so the hope is that as we do our work to heal all the parts of us who have experienced wounds and pains and disappointments, that we can show up from our most authentic and unapologetic selves. And in that, then getting tested won't be such a fear. It won't be um, such an angst. One of the things though, I mean, and I talk about this and I go here and because I cannot not go here when I talk about HIV and specifically Black women, because I get this, they trust, we trust the individual, with our lives, with our souls. And it's like above all else. And it's like, sis, do you really love you? Do you know who you really, really are? Um, And oftentimes, a lot of us are showing up from the wounds of our mother and the wounds of our father. Um, and that plays a huge part when I hear and I see and I witness women who are newly diagnosed. A lot of times the trauma was already there before the diagnosis because there was this part of them, this experience that they didn't love themselves enough to choose them. And I can be honest, even as a woman living with HIV for a long time, especially at the beginning of my diagnosis, I still didn't choose me because I was still that girl looking for love in all the wrong places, or just looking for love, period, whether it was wrong or not. I still was looking for love. I was looking to be seen and to be heard and to be experienced. And as a result, of course, things continue to happen to me in my journey. And just imagine the women who, again, are out here looking to be seen, to be heard, and experience what the sacrifices that they're making, and the choices that they're, making that ultimately put them and make them vulnerable to HIV, which is why I love the work that I do with ViiV Healthcare. They're the only pharmaceutical company that's solely focused on HIV, no leaving no one behind, whether that is the person living with or the person will possible, which if you're not HIV positive, you are definitely possible. And so I love doing that work because one of the things that I heard you say earlier is oftentimes we think of the risk. But one of the things that I love is talking to women about, what are your reasons, sis? What's your reason? What's your reason for getting tested? What is your reason for wanting to stay negative? What is your reason for considering PrEP? What is your reason for going into your doctor's office and saying, hey, I need to have this conversation with you? Is it because you want a family or you have a family? Is it because you have plans and you have goals and you have aspirations? And so just wanting to reframe that as well. Like, sis, what's your reason? Because you got a lot of them. And if you haven't thought about them, I need you to think about, what is your reason for, if it is living with HIV. And for some people, unfortunately, some people don't even believe that they're living, they're just existing.
Mhm.
And so I think for me, giving women voice to say, what's your reason to live? Because you got one. Recognizing that this doesn't have to be a death sentence, recognizing that you're not your status. Baby girl, you are not HIV. Nothing about you is that. But that you are beautiful from the inside out. You are amazing. You're pretty damn dope. Is one of the things I love telling women. You are dope. You really are. Like, So, you know, what's your reason, sis, for choosing to live?
The best way to support is to engage with the content. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. I forgot to ask you about, is her name Hadia?
Idea, Brabant.
Yes. In some of the conversations after her passing, they were talking about how, you know, before she passed, she was kind of dealing with homelessness or dealing with, you know, this is somebody who had been on Oprah years ago as a child, who has been decades in the game of activism, and it still feel like when it comes to her work, she wasn't being taken care of. And what is your thoughts on that?
The system failed her.
Mm,
That's my thought. The system failed her. I met Idea a couple years ago. I followed her, of course, for years, right? She was someone that I admired and I respected. And then when I got to know her more in a deeper experience, I realized the system failed her. Like even now, I hold back emotions because she was dealing with a lot. And I feel like the system used and fucking abused her,
period.
which is another reason why I don't and I will not let them do that to me. I believe in equity. You're gonna pay me for. I tell people I have an HIV, I have a PhD in the life called HIV. I got 29 years. I wish the hell you would think that you would use and abuse me. And then when I need you, you don't show up. So
Period.
no, I'm not going to let you. And I also advocate for others to do the same. Don't you ask somebody to come and share their story and share their experience and sit on your stage and hopefully shift your audience and think that they're not going to get paid and you're not going to take care of them. She showed up for so many organizations, even to the end. And
Yeah.
when we needed them, and when those, because I know people who personally advocated and went to those folks and said, "This is what she needs." Well, how could we do it for her and not for some the? What you
The
mean?
fuck?
This girl then gave her life. She sacrificed as a child, and this is how you do her. So I'm very clear that I won't be the one, and that there won't be many more. I'm not going to let them continue to do that. Um, you know, we had Ryan White. We have Ryan White. We need a Hadia Broadbent movement. And I want to be specific about it looking like how do we support individuals in these spaces for mental health and substance abuse.
Yeah.
It needs to be intentional. Ryan White is very encompassing, right? I love what Ryan White is doing and has done. But we need a Hadia Broadbent now work because there is no reason that a person living with HIV should be struggling with mental health and wellness and wholeness to be able to obtain what they need. It just isn't right. And I would advocate that it is not cookie cutter the way that it has been, taken to mindfulness how certain folk heal, and especially Black and brown bodies, how we heal.
You just talked about, difference and changes that you went through early in your diagnosis around your feeling and choosing you, but you're a whole different space now. At your in your in it, you see it. Like I see, the joy on your face. I see just this confident woman, and not on no resilient. It's like, yo, it's just about. It's like I know what the fuck I got going on. I know who I am. I done been through whatever I've been through, and I can just see it when I engage with you. And so, what was that process to getting to that point? Like for somebody who maybe, early or, early in their diagnosis, what were some of those key steps that got you to the point where you are today? Not saying that it's all, roses, but
Right. I had to heal. Um, there's a little girl, several little girls inside of me. So, we know everybody's talking about inner child,
yeah,
my inner child. It's actually inner children, and it's the parts of us. And so for me, the biggest thing was to do the work to heal all the parts of me. Um, the 6-year-old, or rather, I can go back to the 2-year-old, which for me was the first time that I could, when I do my work. And there was a 2-year-old who, that was when I first experienced what felt like rejection. Um, I remember my mother bringing my little brother home, and I was standing behind them. And the vision that I used to always have this vision of my mom with the car seat with my baby brother in it, but I never knew what it was about. And when, as I continued to do my work to heal and get to know all the parts of me, I recognized that that was the earliest time that I felt abandonment and rejection, felt that I wasn't good enough, that my mother was in love with this baby, and where did I stand? And so from that, of course, the different seasons and moments of my life, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, all these narratives began to create who and how I showed up in the world. And so for me, when I was diagnosed with HIV, um, even then, the story was a story, a narrative. For then, there was two things I knew at the time of my diagnosis. I knew that it wasn't unto death and that God would use me, but I didn't know what that would look like. Um, and so in 2017, fast forward, just living my life, doing all the things in 2017, 2018, um, I was successful for what the world could see, but I was empty. And I remember going to God and I said, something's missing. I don't know what's the next. And God said, you already know what the next is. And I said, oh, the devil's a lie. Because it was for me, I was very clear that my story, somebody else's life was attached to it. And so what that meant is I was going to need to do the work to begin to heal all of the wounds, all of the pain, all of the disappointment, so that I could show up today and be who I am for the young girl or the young man, or the they that need me, to recognize that you are so much bigger than anything that could happen, what we say to you, but the reality is it's happening through me and it's happening for me. And so I can say, even then, I really wasn't still in love with me, all of me. I didn't really understand what love really was. What did it mean to really love Shadawn? I was still doing everything for everybody else. I was still people pleasing, codependent, all of the things. But then when I began to do the work to heal all the parts of me, get to know, like I said, all the little girls that lived inside of me. Right now, I carry with me, I'm very clear when I wake up, who's with me today. I'm very clear that they did the best that they could. And now, because I am in a lot of more self-led energy, I'm leading from love, I'm leading from compassion and curiosity and connectedness. I get to be what they need me to be. My parts don't have to rule and wake up and show up. Shadawn gets to lead with them. So I tell people when I talk about healing work and the parts of us, we can lead with or in. And so I'm not in the part, but they're with me. So I say this in meaning that sometimes when I talk about, I have a 16-year-old part who she real rah-rah. That was the time in my life where I got tired of fighting, or I got tired of taking and I started fighting. And so I realized that she was the one who oftentimes when I'm ready to put my hands on you, it's because that part of me feels very defenseless. And so now I don't lead from wanting to put my hands on you, but I lead with her very present and honoring this the spectrum and the spirit of my 16-year-old who wants to fight, but we get to choose to do something different. And so what you see is someone who is very clear about all of the parts of me, not leading from my wounds, but recognizing they're still with me, but I'm not in them. And so I just show up from loving all of me, everything that has encompassed me. And that's of course a part of it being my HIV diagnosis. But I'm not that. And I'm so glad that I was able to literally do the work to realize that I am not my diagnosis. I am a beautiful, bold, amazing individual who has an assignment. Because I tell people right now, I'm in the season of my soul's assignment. I'm very clear about what that is. And that is to bring hope and inspiration and transformation to anybody that experiences me. Hopefully, that they get to see the light and the love that permeates from me because of the spirit that dwells inside of me. Um, so, yeah, that's what it took. It took me doing the work. Now, when I talk about I am a therapist, right? I'm a licensed therapist, but I'm more a healer. And so I tell people this, you get to choose who you do the work with also. It doesn't have to be a therapist. As long as you know that the person has what you need and they're able to support you and help guide you on your journey, do that. I tell people this, every healer has the capacity to be a therapist, but every therapist isn't a healer. And so you get to choose the person that you go on this journey with. Therapists are amazing, but we're all not made equal. So just find that person or that what you need and get it so that in whoever you work with is able to look at you, the wholeness of who you are, mind, body, and soul. So for some people, it will be a therapist and a healer or a practitioner or whatever that is. Just find what works for you because it's, it just depends. Of course, I'm a spiritual person. I believe in God. And so I have a personal relationship. And so that's another thing that guides me. But I tell people I'm Christian plus because I still believe in Reiki and crystals and, grounding in our chakras. And I'm just that person. Who believes it takes it all. And what do you need? Take a little bit of this and a little bit of that to do the work so that you can show up fully and whole who you were created to be outside of what has happened through you and for you.
And that's some black ass American shit. So that kind of taking a piece, taking it all.
Mhm.
And for me, it, how I confronted that question for myself is when people would, anytime I had these kind of problems, people would always say, "You gotta love yourself," and I'm like, "Bitch, how the fuck I'm supposed to love myself? How the fuck do you do that? What is the steps, bitch?" Because I always been feeling like a bad bitch. Anytime I look in the mirror, I feel comfortable. I always anybody who know me, I always feel I dress fly. I do what I can to look fly. I don't look in the mirror and be like, ugh, you ugly. I already love myself, bitch, but I'm still going through this shit. So what the fuck are you talking about? What do I need to do? And so for me, I think therapists and healers give you the tools because in their profession they are looking and finding tools for you to figure this shit out where you alone are not doing that. And so they have tools that they can show you.
So, but I'm gonna be honest, and I know some people are gonna disagree with me on this, but we are our own best self healers. We really are. And so the reality is that so there's a couple things. Prayer, you always talking. Meditation, get quiet. Because in the silence will you hear what you need. A lot of us don't want to get silent because again, we know when we get silent, the truth will speak. Whether that's the Holy Spirit or whatever that is that you know that's within you is going to tell you the truth. So yes, people say that. But for me, when I talk about self-love, it's going to take you getting to know yourself and being confronting the ego part of us because the ego is the protector of your fears. So you got to get quiet though, so that you know what that is. So yeah, like I tell people, there was a season where I was like bad bitch energy. Oh my God, da 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 da. But I didn't feel that. I really didn't. And so the question becomes is if you're still experiencing situations, you got to get to know that pain. You got to understand that wound because that's where it's coming from. It's attached to something that a part of you is still afraid to allow you to get close to.
Right.
So, yeah, you're experiencing things because there's something still that you need to get close to, but you only gonna get close to it when you get quiet.
Yeah.
It's something to think about because
Absolutely.
yes, people are talking about self-love, 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 but how do you get there when you already think you love yourself, but yet you still see you're stuck in certain places? My ask is for people to get quiet.
Mm.
in the
Tell
silence.
me some of the work that you're doing now. What is that are wrapped around your vision of this kind of liberation and joy and love of your community? Like what work are you doing now that you're working on that just makes you feel proud and while it may be work, it's still like, oh my God, this is aligns with my purpose. What is that looking like for you these days?
So that is definitely the work that I do with, like I was saying earlier, with Risk to Reasons with V Pharmaceutical. I really love the work. And yes, it's a pharmaceutical company. And yes, like everything, there's the give and takes. But I really love Beef. I really love that they have created a movement for Black women, intentional with Black women. And that's, again, the spectrum of Black women, both my cis and trans sisters. And it is really, truly reframing the narrative for Black women and us getting to take our power back and have the conversations that are necessary around, bitch, I'm not a, oh, excuse me.
No,
I'm
you can cuss.
not, I'm not a risk, but I do have reasons. And I am going to make sure that you are clear about me knowing what those are, so that I can stand in my power. I love the work because it's fun. It's about, we get to talk about sex and pleasure and desires and all the things. And it's something that I get to do and it's work, supposedly. Um, and then, of course, I still do work with the CDC. I was an ambassador for 3 years, and I'm still just a real champion for that campaign, Let's Stop HIV Together. What does it look like? I'm a proponent of, again, about people really getting tested, doing your part. And I know it's not easy, but choose you. So what does that look like? How do you get to do that? That's some of the things. I still work. I do a lot of work with different organizations and community, the Truth Project, which sits at the intersection of really mental health and arts and healing as a whole. Something that I'm getting ready to do personally is I'm getting ready to create a podcast. That's been dropped in my spirit for so many years to do. And of course, now everybody has a podcast, but I'm not worried about what everybody's doing. Um, it will be a space where we heal together because I believe that we heal as a collective. And so it's going to be about just this real conversations. It's called Healing is a Vibe, which also stands for HIV. The acronym, I didn't know it when I created it, but again, it just aligns. Nothing is done by mistake. And so just going to continue to create more spaces where we get to heal in community, where sound bowl and breath work and all of those things get to continue to merge. And just continue being a speaker. I recently was at BeautyCon on main stage, talking about the intersection of beauty, and sexual health and pleasure and all the things. And, people see me, as a beautiful woman from the outside, but like I tell people, beauty starts in the inside. And that's what I want to continue to also amplify for individuals. Everything, for me, isn't always about HIV. It's just about loving you, all of you, and just showing up in your whole badass energy. You're unapologetic. And when I say unapologetic, not apologizing for who you are. And just being really authentic, not apologizing for who you are and how you were created, learning to love all the parts of you. Because I believe that no, there are no bad parts to us. They're all doing the best that they can so that we can live whole.
Tell me, what is bringing you euphoria this week? It could be something mundane and silly or whatever, making you happy and bringing you joy, or it can be something deep. Whatever it is, this week, what is bringing you euphoria?
Um, so it's I only got a few clients that I got to see this week. So that's very
Less
euphoric.
work.
Let's work. Because I get to, and the reason is euphoric is because I still get to work on and focus on my own healing and grief around the election last week. I need this time for me. And it was honestly when I realized I had this podcast today, I'm helping to direct a photo shoot later today and tomorrow, the videography part of that. And so the euphoric part is that I just get to, focus on me and be intentional about, I'm not waiting to December 31st or January 1st to set goals. I'm very clear that I'm going to work on that this week. So that brings me a lot of euphoric and it just joy, because I'm very clear on the win of this next season.
What's bringing me euphoria this week is I am so excited about Wicked to see Cynthia Erivo kill this role. That book came out in '95 when I was in high school, like the year I literally went to high school, and that Gregory Maguire is the person who wrote Wicked, and he has so many other books. One is Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister, and his books have because the theme, but his book is always taking like fairy tales and making them in a different, making you look at them in a different way. So to see them kind of this movie come to life when I've been wanting this movie to come to life, me thinking about going to watch Wicked is something that I am so excited to do, and that's what's bringing me euphoria this week. So I want to
Yay!
thank you for coming on the show, and I appreciate your wisdom. I appreciate who you are, and anytime I see you in the space, it just makes my world light up. I appreciate you so much. Can you tell the people where they can find you?
You guys can follow me on all social media platforms. Literally everything is Shadawn McCants. I make it very easy. Shadawn McCants. That's on social media, every social media. What is that? Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all the things. If you want to find me, same thing. If you want to, I'm very open right now. If I have time and space, I respond to DMs, which they're not too overwhelming at most for the most part. So yeah, if you send me a message, I will respond. Yeah, just follow me there and stay tuned for all the things that are going to happen.
And I'm gonna put those links down in the bottom so y'all can definitely follow this powerhouse. And we will talk to y'all next week. Thank you for tuning in.
Talk to y'all soon.
The best way to support is to engage with the content. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Another way to support, if you got a couple of dollars, become a patron. It's a monthly donation just to help content creators continue to do work that they do. So you're sacrificing a coffee or, just a small portion just to show your appreciation for the entertainment that we provide to you on a consistent basis. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.